You moved over to Roush Racing in '06, but it was evidently a little bit of a process.
Hated it. Yeah, absolutely hated it. Roush was just what's the right word? A horrible place to work. Ganassi, what I remember about Chip is when things, if you had a great weekend, he might call you on Monday, but probably not. But if you had a terrible weekend, he would call you that night, Sunday night, and he'd be like, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're going to fix it. We're going to get it better. We believe in you." So something to that effect. And I remember I'd go to bed every Sunday night after I talked to him and be like, "That's pretty cool that he called me and made me feel pretty good. It's not my fault." Because whether it's the driver's fault or not, he controls more than anyone else, and he has to believe that he can do it. And if the owner beats him up and he loses confidence, he'll never perform. And Roush was the exact opposite. Gosh, Jack you would go. First off, it was a horrible work environment, just in the fact that I don't think anybody liked being there. Like I just mean like everyone that worked there, it was just the culture was so weird, and it started at the top. It was ruthless. And I remember the saying there was, there's 5 dogs and only 4 bones, and you better get in and get one or you're screwed. And I'm like, this is just horrible. Like but they were successful. And if you think of that time, all Hall of Fame guys there with Matt, Carl, Greg, Mark, the first year. I mean, so it was competitive. And I came into that and I'm like, well, I just have to figure out how to make it work because all these guys are running well. But then you would get in these meetings and Jack would head up these meetings and you would have to go around the room and talk about your race. And if it didn't go well, you would say, just the balance was too loose. And he would be like, well, Carl's track bar was higher than yours and he wasn't loose. And he'd like call you out in front of everybody. And I just remember I'm like, well, yeah, but he's got 100 pounds more left for a sprint. You're just making me feel beneath myself, and you're not looking at the whole picture. And it's just that whole time there, financially, were the greatest 4 years of my life. Like the sponsorship, financially, it set me for life. But mentally, like, oh my gosh, that was a horrible time. I still drive by that building and cringe. I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, it was horrible.
So was it just a case of the grass being greener?
So
to make the move from.
So when I was at Ganassi, we ran really well 2003, 4, 5, but we didn't win. And pit crews were always an issue. And engines were also an issue. I told you us being so fast at Indy, they took the cars to the chassis dyno after that race, and I'm making this up because I don't know the exact number, but it was like 75 horsepower we were off compared to the Gibbs cars at the time. A lot, right? Like if you're making 700 and they make 775, it's like you're like, well, how could I even beat them? But when they took the cars to the wind tunnel, we were significantly ahead of them. So we had like the cars, we just didn't have the engines at the time. The problem was I think they could make the engines make more power, they just would blow up. And you think back to that time, people blew up there's a lot of people that blew up at the time. And so I'm telling you all that because I thought we needed better pit crews and we also needed better engines. And I had Penske, Joe Gibbs Racing, God, who else? Everyone, any race team. Like, I don't think Hendrick was, but all these race teams were calling my agent like, we want Jamie. All of them were. And what led me to Roush, like my son asked me a lot, like, do you wish you could, because he knows how much I hated being there. He's like, do you wish you could take that back? And I'm like, part of me does, but part of me, I love the way my life turned out. Like if I hadn't went to Roush, I maybe wouldn't have ended up back at Ganassi and I wouldn't have won the Daytona 500. So I don't know. We're 4 bad years worth of that. But Roush in 2005 won every 1.5 mile racetrack there was. And not just would they win, but they would finish 1st through 5th. Like they just dominated. And Crown Royal and Irwin were going to be the sponsors. I'm like, that's a pretty cool sponsor to have. They're fast. but I never went to the race. I remember I never went to the race shop because it was a secret, because I still had a year left on my contract at Ganassi. So I signed this in 2005 thinking I wasn't going there until 2007. After it all gets signed, I went to Roush for the first, we come home from Homestead. I go get my suit and my junk at Ganassi. And I remember driving straight to Roush. And I walked in, I start walking around, and it's all Kurt's cars. And I remember looking at the cars and thinking, wow, these aren't near as nice as where I just left. Like the craftsmanship, they were fast. They didn't look good, and they were dated, I thought. I mean, just the way they mounted pedals and just everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ganassi was way ahead. But yeah, the grass was greener. I'm like, man, they have it all because they're winning. But the reality was they had great drivers and they were able to put it all together. But it was a little disappointing when I got over there.
2007, in the summer at Daytona, you did win, and it was a great finish between you and Kyle. You finished, I guess,
0.005 of a second.
Yeah. Because of everything that was going on, was that win still satisfying, or were you still in maybe a little bit of a honeymoon period, if there ever was one?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I will tell you that every day at Roush was a struggle. Every meeting. And I can see it now on drivers' faces. When I interview them, or when I see them do interviews, when they talk, I know exactly how they feel. Yeah. You maybe don't, but I do, because I lived it. And I'm like, they say the right thing, but I can read their face and know they don't believe a word they're saying. It's serious. But that's what you do. You have to say the right thing. You can't say, I could never at the time have said, well, I think Roush is a terrible place to work. Like, I just don't like the culture. I don't like what's going on here. But I don't, I mean, 2007, I don't know. It was also like I wasn't really ever worried about losing my job at Roush, even though we were running terrible, because I had signed a 4-year contract that they were going to pay me either way. And I don't remember ever. And honestly, even when they did not renew my contract in 2000, at the end of 2009, I don't know. I mean, like, I didn't even know that. I just assumed they'd have me back because, the sponsors liked me. I did everything for them. And I don't know. But I dreaded that. I made great friends. I mean, Matt and Greg turned out to be two of my closer friends in life. Those guys, they'll probably never admit it. And Greg never went on anywhere else. But I think if you could get Matt and Carl to be honest, that when they went to Gibbs, that they had to be like, wow, I had no idea. And I've never talked to him about it, but I just like, yeah, that place, and it's changed. I think Brad coming in has really turned that around, but it was not good then.
When did you start talking to Chip about going back?
Jeff Smith, who was the president of Roush Racing, I went to eat lunch with him. Remember, we drove back to Roush. We stayed in his car, and he's like, Jamie, because they were going from, if you remember, they were going from 5. NASCAR would only, at the time, you could have 5 cars. 2010, you were only allowed to have 4 teams. Like I don't know why that was, but that's what it was. He's like, we're going to cut down to 4 teams. And he's like, and I don't remember the exact circumstance. I mean, I think he sugarcoated, but the reality was I wasn't running good enough. And David Reagan was there at the time, and he was pretty fresh and new still. And I think they were like, we're going to take our chances with David and let Jamie go. So I started talking to Chip immediately. But that time was right after the stock market crashed and the housing market all crashed, and sponsors were doing less. I mean, it was hard then. Like that was prior to that. It was like one sponsor did a whole car. Man, 2010, there were just it was lean, and there were teams shutting down, and I don't even remember how. I think that I had started talking to Chip. Actually, my friendship stayed good with Chip. I remember sending him text messages after, like, even when I was at Roush, he'd won the Rolex 24, won the IndyCar championship, and I stayed in contact with him. There was no hard. I mean, again, Chip made money when I left. They paid. It was messed up, but like, Kurt left. Kurt still had a year left on his contract at Roush. I had a year left on my contract at Ganassi. Penske needed a driver. So it was like Penske paid Ganassi to let me out of my contract so that I could go to Roush, so Roush could let, like, it was Chip made a little money, I think, on the whole deal. I think it worked out well for him. But I just, you know what,
people made a lot of money off of you changing.
Apparently they did, yeah. I'm not the only one. There's been a lot of guys that have been through that. But I mean, that was the best opportunity that was available. I knew what I was getting. And that was also in that time that they were merging with DEI. You remember that? It was like Earnhardt Ganassi at the time. There was some it was a little confusing there, but that's where I wanted to go. And when I got back to Ganassi, they only had a part-time sponsorship from Bass Pro. Like it was like half the races or something. And it was a lean, like it wasn't like it was a massive half race sponsorship that you could figure out how to make it work. And so they had only committed like to run part of the schedule when I signed it. But McDonald's was someone that my agent had a relationship with, and we thought McDonald's would come over, and then went out and won the Daytona 500. And I think I told him I was going to McDonald's, and that helped a lot.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
I bet it did. So that green-white checkered 2010. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how drivers drive Daytona and Talladega anymore. It just seems beyond my comprehension.
Harder to watch than to do, I think, because when you watch a race, you see 10 cars at least all making decisions. When you're driving, you're only making a decision for your car. And things are out of your control. Some of it is. You have to have a little bit of luck, the right person to go with you. But what I remember about Daytona is getting in the driver's meeting. And at the time, I think we only did one green-white checkered. That was the rule. One green-white checkered's all they were doing. And I remember in the driver's meeting, I think they said it was unlimited. They're like, we're going to change the rules. It's unlimited green-white checkers. Or it was 3. I don't remember. I think it was unlimited. And everyone in the driver's meeting, including myself, was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. Because all we're going to do is wreck cars on every green-white. You're like, let's just do one, wreck them, and we'll go home. I'm like, gosh, if we have to line up 3 times, we're just going to keep wrecking. But I'm glad they did. Because it was the 3rd green-white checker that I won on. That we had.
Was it?
Yeah, we'd had 2 prior to that. I think I lined up 6th or 8th on the first green-white checkered. And then I got up to, I wasn't even the leader I don't remember if I was the leader or not. I just remember, I don't think I was. I think I was 2nd. And whoever the leader was took the bottom. And I was like, I want the top. Like, that's just where that's where I wanted my car to be. And what was so interesting is that I was racing all my Roush teammates. It was Greg, Carl, Matt. It was all those guys that I had been teammates with over the past 3 or 4 years. They were all lined up around me, and I was the Ganassi car up front. And Greg passed me on the inside, like coming to the white flag. Greg got a run, got to my inside, and almost cleared me and going into turn 1, but he didn't. And the track was so slick. It was hard to run wide open. That's why I wanted the outside, because I knew that I could run wide open. And I got a little bit of a run on him through 1 and 2. As we exited 2, I went to like steer away from him so he couldn't drag me back. And at the same time, I think it was either Boyer or Dale Jr. They were like a row or 2 back, and they moved up with me. And I remember it feeling like I had a parachute on my car, and when they got behind me, it was like someone cut the parachute loose, and my car just like took off. And I was like, I hope they start wrecking, because we've already taken the white, and I'm going to win this thing. And I have this great memory in my head that I hope I never forget, and I can see it. And it starts in like the middle of turns 3 and 4. I can look in my rearview mirror and I can see Dale Jr. And if you've ever like merged on the interstate on an on-ramp and you look at the car behind you and you have to make a decision of like, are they coming fast enough that I can't merge in front of them, or can I get in front of them? You know that, right? Like, you know how that gap's going to close. And I remember looking and I'm like, he's not going to get here. Like, I can just see that he doesn't have enough of a run. And then this vision like switches to out the windshield, and I can see the checkered flag, and it happens like my car can't go fast enough to get there, right? Because I'm like, I just want to get to the checkered flag, but I can still see that, and it's it's one of those things. I think because it's such an amazing memory that it's just kind of burned in my brain. Yeah, that's what I see.
All right, so you had started out banging around go-kart tracks, and then you went to work for a truck team, and it was just you and one other guy. Went to Bruco and all that. Struggled. But then you won the Daytona 500. What did that mean to you?
I did not know how special that was until I won it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's because I was always pretty good at those type tracks, but I never went into any of them thinking like I'm going to win today. Because you have to get lucky at those, and you have to put yourself in the right position, and things can change so fast. But after winning it and doing the media tour, like the Letterman and all those shows that you do afterwards, I mean, you don't go home. You go straight to New York, and I think I went to San Francisco, then to Phoenix. Like, you just do all this media, and then, I mean, that's been 14 years ago. And every time I've been introduced since, they don't say Jamie McMurray. They say the 2010 Daytona 500 champion, Jamie McMurray. Like, it's just, everyone says it. And after winning that, every year going back to Daytona, I'm like, man, it would be so special to win again. Like, I think you have to win that to appreciate the value of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You did follow that up with a win at the Brickyard.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
Definitely two of the Keystone events, and then you won again at Charlotte. What did it mean to be able to put together that kind of solid season?
Yeah, I never, because I had won on restrictor plate tracks at the time, those did not mean, winning is obviously as special, but I was like, I want to win anywhere but there. I want to win on a mile and a half or a short track or a road course I really wanted to win at because I was good at road racing. But Indy was special because Chip had this history at Indy and winning the Indy 500. But we also should have won the Coke 600. Caution came out, a few laps to go, and Kurt Busch and I had raced the whole race, and he'd lead like the first 15 laps of a run, and then I'd pass him and drive away, and caution came out with like 15 to go, and I couldn't get back by him. The Southern 500, we finished second in. Bristol, we finished third in. There were a lot of races that year that we were just a contender to win those. But it was very satisfying to put together a whole year and run well at almost every type racetrack. And I just remember the media day in January. I remember like I told you when after winning at Charlotte, I should have walked around with my chest stuck out. I remember going to media day that year and feeling like I had my chest stuck out because I'm like, we're a legit contender. Like, we've won at all these tracks. We're going into a new year. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to do exactly what we're doing. And the questions at media day were so much fun to answer because they were winning questions, not what do you got to do to turn it around?
Yeah.
What I mean? There's some drivers you're like, what's going to be different? And there's other drivers you interview, like, you think you have a shot at the championship. And I'm like, we're going to get to be in the fun conversation this year. Little did I know that 2011 and 2012 are just going to just slowly get worse and worse and worse. And it's unbelievable that they changed the rules just a little bit. They went from, I don't know, they changed the splitter and they changed this rear spoiler. They changed a couple things. And man, when we changed it, we just weren't as fast as we were. And that was hard. And that sent the race team into just a tailspin of changing everything, trying to figure out how to get back to where we were.
You still stayed.
I did for a few reasons. First off, and you said this, I knew the grass wasn't greener.
Yeah.
I knew that I just had a lot of belief in the organization and the team and the people that they were hiring, the process. Chip every year would make a bigger commitment to the team. And I say that he made this commitment to Hendrick Engines in 2014, I think it was. And that was the year we had this high downforce package. And I think that was the first year Larson came along, and we were super fast at a lot of racetracks. And we had some parts failures that kept us from winning that year. But in 2014, I don't think Kyle won that year either. I remember him being really quick, but I don't think he won. But I just remember at the end of the year, even though we didn't get the results we wanted, like performance-wise, we're really good.
Your last full-time season was in 2018. What went into that decision to kind of step away from? Was it purely TV or family or maybe a combination, or was it just time?
Yeah, no, I didn't make that decision, and I say that because I Kurt, if you historically look back through Kurt Busch's career, he was like a 2 or 3 year at an organization and then move on 2 or 3. It was just a path, and he was up at Stewart Haas, and he had this monster money, and there's a lot of factors that played into this. I talked to Chip about it at length. You remember DC Solar was a big partner of Chip's. The FBI raids the guy and they lose that whole and that was a big sponsorship. Target had been at Ganassi for 27 years, I think. They had left. So there, it was tough. Like it was hard, and Kurt went to Chip with some monster money and something else, and Chip's like, I can't keep you just because I like you. Like I've got to do a business decision, and I've got 140 employees I have to think about. So he's like, we're not going to renew your contract. And it was hard. I mean, it was really hard to accept that. And at the time, I remember going and I talked to Richard Childress. I went to his motorhome and I talked to him a little bit about going over there. I don't remember. I think Newman maybe was over there at the time, and maybe Ryan was leaving. I don't remember the exact details. But I remember not pursuing very hard, and I didn't go to any other race teams. I didn't go talk to anyone else. I only went to Richard, and I don't know. I think it's because of Bass Pro had an affiliation with him, and so did Cessno, and those were some partners I'd had. But I remember, I don't know. Like I'm thankful that it happened because, like, I didn't know there was other life. Does that make sense? Like when you get in this not rut, but this schedule of, for 23 years, I just got up every day and I went to a race shop, and I'd leave on Thursday and go to a racetrack, and that was my life. And you don't even know that there's other things that happen on the weekends at home. You're just very close. You have like blinders on. And so I was like, maybe, I don't know. Like every driver wants to go out the way that Jeff Gordon, Mark Martin, Rusty Wallace, like these legends go. Everybody wants to go out with like a big tour, right? But I don't think I ever would have done it. Like I think it's too hard to walk away. You just would stay and prolong it, because there's some guys that do that, right? There's some guys that they just keep digging, and I'm telling you all that because Fox came to me at Homestead and asked me about doing this. They had the Hollywood Hotel that was at the racetrack. They're like, we're going to get rid of this. We're building this state-of-the-art green room in Charlotte, and we're going to do all of our stuff in Charlotte. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, maybe I'll give it a try. And I went and did Race Hub a couple of times prior to that new studio being built. And then I started doing that pre-race show, and it was really hard the first year. Like deep down inside, you're like, boy, I hope somebody will call. I hope that like Rick Hendrick, I don't know, you're just dreaming, right? Like maybe if somebody gets sick, they'll be like, Jamie's our guy, But at the same time, like TV it's become, I don't know, like it's no stress. I enjoy doing it. You laugh a lot. You get to tell your side of a story. It's a different perspective on the sport, and it's turned out to be just incredible for me. But walking away, not 100% my choice, but I am glad it worked out the way that it did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When did you start running?
I started running. So, I believe that just like they try to make your car better every year, that drivers every year try to find that next thing that will make them better. And I'd always been into fitness. Do you know who Josh Wise is?
Yeah.
You know the name, right?
Yeah,
So Josh at the time, Josh now heads up Chevy's development program. They have this junior program, and then he also trains a lot of the current Chevy drivers. Josh had come to Max Jones, who was running Ganassi in 2018, and he's like, I want to come in, train drivers, help them work on all these different aspects. Max hired him. I, at the time, was like, what's the next step for me? And I told Josh, so I meet with Josh, and I'm like, I just want you to take me to the next level of fitness, like whatever that is. And so he started me running, and this, like, I tell the story a lot. He's like anyone who's ever tried to run, most people put their running shoes on, they leave the house, and they run as hard as they can until they can't walk. And then they come home and they're like, I'm never running again because I'm too sore. It's the worst mistake everyone makes. Josh tells me, he's like, Jamie, I want you to, put your shoes on, start your watch, and just run 5 minutes away, turn around and run 5 minutes home. And I'm like, 5 minutes? And I'm like, that's not going to do anything. And he's like, I know, we're going to build it up. Okay. So I do that for like a week. And then all of a sudden he's like, let's do 10 minutes. I run 10 minutes away. Well, eventually I'm doing like 10 miles a week, which is like, I'm like, this is incredible. So then I get a little bit of the running bug, and I want to do more because I'm competitive. And I go to him and I'm like, I want to do a marathon. It's what a lot of people want to do, right? So he put together a training plan for me to do this marathon. And so I get up to like running, I don't know, 30 miles a week at my big week, 35 miles a week, right? And I think I've just done it all. I do a marathon and I just become passionate about running. I now run 10 miles a day. I try to run 6 days a week. I got up to some point at running 80 to 90 miles a week. Like, it just has become, but I will tell you that running for me, like this podcast, I listen to this podcast each week when I run. I listen to podcasts the whole time I run, and I listen to them for different reasons. I listen to this one because I enjoy the old stories, because like this scene that I can see behind me, I remember getting to the trailer on Thursday or Friday, and there was no social media. So you had to see what people said about you in this, right? But I also listen to a lot of the drivers' podcast or the interviews they do because they use it for TV. It's a great way to do a little bit of work while you run, and there's nothing distracting you. So, like I listen to what drivers say, and then it gives me, an opinion to have on what they're doing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. Fan.
Kind of wrung it out, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Awesome.